All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Role Players, Episode 7. We've got my man Reese Britt, and then we've got Mr. Trey Whiteowl making his second appearance of the season. Or is this your third appearance for...
I think it's my third, yeah.
Hey, it's always a pleasure to have you either way. But, guys, we got a lot to talk about, especially college football. So, But before we get into it, we had Thanksgiving over the break, and I wanted to ask both of you really quick, what is your favorite gobble-gobble food? Reese, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so... this will probably be the most controversial thing that we all, hear today, but my mom makes phenomenal green beans, and I love, I could eat green beans with every single meal. I love them. I like turkey and I like stuffing, but, her green beans are my favorite thing at Thanksgiving.
I don't think that's controversial at all.
You don't think so?
No.
Wow. I think a lot of people would disagree.
I mean, it's definitely an off choice, but I wouldn't say
yeah.
controversial.
Okay, well that's fair. Maybe
Trey, you got any controversial choices?
I have one that might be, but I'm not entirely sure. I've never really cared for stuffing in general.
That's not controversial at all. I'm with you right there, brother.
But
oh no, man.
Turkey's just my deal. Every time I go to my family's Thanksgiving, it's always the turkey I grab first, and everything else is just whatever. If I get it, I get it.
Do you get a wing, or are you just going right in the middle?
I'm going right in the middle.
Okay, that's respectable.
Wow,
that's respectable. I figured you'd go for the wing, but that's hey, I'm all for it.
I go for the leg.
Yeah,
I'm
or
a leg
that it's the leg and not the wing. I don't know.
Well, no, there's a wing too, but it just doesn't have a lot of meat on it.
Yeah, the leg was probably what I meant. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just said wing.
That's all right.
Being an idiot,
no.
as I normally am.
That's okay.
I'll go dessert for mine. There's nothing better in this world for me than finishing a Thanksgiving dinner with some pecan pie and some ice cream. Some you heat up the pecan pie and the ice cream just a little bit so it's nice and warm and gooey on the inside. Ooh. There's nothing like it in this world. But we move on. So I'm glad you guys have a good Thanksgiving. I did as well. But we're going to talk into college football because boy oh boy, we have a lot to talk about. We're going to start off with a rivalry week ending with Bama getting a miracle on 4th and goal from the 29-yard line with a touchdown pass to Isaiah Bond, 27-24, to get the win over Auburn. Or was that the score? I don't think that was the score.
It was 34. It was 34. Or no, it was 33-27,
something like that.
It was something like that.
I
because they did
wrong.
something late that it was
they got a pick six at the end.
Yeah, something like that.
I got the score wrong,
but it was basically 27-20. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
And then Ohio State and Michigan didn't disappoint as
wait, Alabama versus Auburn?
Yeah.
Yeah, what was that?
No, that was 27-24.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was.
Because when I finished watching that game, it popped up with 33. I switched back to it, and it was 33-24.
Yeah,
and
they got
a
pick
what
six.
In the world?
I thought they got a pick six at the end of the game.
I can check real quick.
I don't know.
It's okay. I mean, they might have
yeah,
they might have called it off or something like that. But
yeah, I'm not sure. But Ohio State Michigan ended Michigan getting the win 30-24 without Jim Harbaugh in that one.
It was intercepted and brought back to the Auburn 3.
So he took a knee.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so I wasn't wrong.
Good on that guy.
Yep, and good on Trey Whiteowl for your research,
absolutely.
Man. And he's always the GOAT, man.
No, he is.
And then lastly, on Thanksgiving, the Egg Bowl, Ole Miss takes down Mississippi State 17-7 in a rare low-scoring game for Lane Kiffin. Not a lot of points, but hey, he got the win, so that's all that matters.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is Lane Kiffin does not thrive in low-scoring games.
No, he does not.
He has not won many low-scoring games of the past years that he's been at Ole Miss. So for him to be in that situation where it was what was it? It was 7-3
for the
longest time. And 3-0 at halftime, first and foremost, but it was 7-3 for a long time. And I was just Lane Kiffin might lose this ball game because he is not comfortable coaching in close games.
No, rare moment of patience for Lane Kiffin. A lot of patience shown in this game, which is, hey, good for you.
Good for that guy.
10-2 now, and they're just right outside the top 10, so he's got that program rolling.
Yeah.
All right, so now let's talk about what we really want to talk about with college football playoffs. This week is championship week. We're going to see some big games. Obviously, the big one being Bama against Georgia in Atlanta for the SEC championship with a lot of playoff implications. Florida takes on Louisville. And then the really big one, Washington and Oregon, as they will play in the final Pac-12 championship. And that's basically a win and get in scenario potentially. But, guys, we got some playoff scenarios because that's what we really want to talk about in this week. And, again, we got a lot of big games with playoff scenarios. The big one, I think, in my opinion, is Georgia and Alabama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's about the only game, in my opinion, that can really shake up anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because granted, I think Louisville's a phenomenal football team this year, but Florida State, if they win, they're in. Right?
No doubt.
Well, if Oregon wins against Washington, then that might knock Washington out of the
exactly.
entire
Yeah.
Well, I think
Yeah.
Washington's out if they lose. I think that game is a win and get in for both teams.
Yes, and so if Alabama wins, they still have that head-to-head loss against Texas that we can talk about, and Texas has Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship. So there's a lot of uneasiness, especially if you're on that committee, because if you don't make the right decision, you could. It could be done. Like you could be off the committee.
Yeah, there's a lot of scenarios, and the first one, like you said, we were going to talk about is the Texas head-to-head win over Bama in week 2?
It was week 2.
Yeah.
So this is what we were talking about earlier when we were off air, just kind of joking around in the hallway. I understand where people from Texas are going to come from. You have a head-to-head win on the road against Alabama, but if you take a look at Texas' schedule, none of their wins that they previously had over top 25 teams are still ranked.
Right.
Okay. Your one ranked win would be Oklahoma. Your second one would be Oklahoma State if you're able to pull it off and win the Big 12 this weekend. But you take a look at Alabama's schedule.
Yeah.
Yes, you have the one blemish to Texas, but LSU's still ranked. Ole Miss is still ranked. Who else is there?
Tennessee's still ranked. Who else is in there?
You would beat Georgia.
I think that's it. Yeah. So you'd beat the number 1 team. And I get all that. And I know where people are coming from in that situation. But the committee, year after year, and I told you this a couple minutes ago, I said the committee year in and year out has always taken the path of least resistance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is Florida State one of the best 4 teams in the country right now with Jordan Travis being out? No.
Probably not.
Right. And so is Texas right now better than Alabama with how Alabama's come on, the late part of the season? No. I think Alabama's a better team than Texas. But if the committee picks Alabama over Texas, it's basically telling the entire country and all college football fans the regular season doesn't matter. It does not matter if you play that team head-to-head. We are just going to put the 4 best teams that we think are the 4 best in the college football playoff.
Trey, I want to get your thoughts on this because I do agree with Reese in the fact that the regular season doesn't matter. But to me, I think if you're going to look at strength of record and strength of schedule and have that factor in, at least in my opinion, I look at Alabama's strength of record and their strength of schedule, and to me that should at least cancel out the loss to Texas. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
I think the strength of schedule aspect of it is probably the way I'd go about it. Because, like you said, they played Ole Miss, they played Texas, they played what was the other one? Before Georgia.
They beat Tennessee, which is still ranked.
Yeah. And then they beat
LSU,
right? So they've played a much hard. They've, at least from that aspect, have played a lot more ranked teams and a lot more, I guess, teams that are harder to beat than that of Texas. So I get the overall argument that beating Alabama should give you like a higher, a higher spot, and a higher chance than them. But if you're going to have, let's use NFL terms here. If you're going to play way back when Brady was playing, you have an entire season, 6 games against the AFC East, one of the worst divisions at the time. But then you play like the Baltimore Ravens, who are 10-4
dominant
or something. Yeah, but that's the only hard team you played the entire season versus a Baltimore team that had to go against the Steelers, had to go against a decent Bengals team, had to go against just harder competition. And as a whole, how would you realistically think? Like, who would you think would be better at that point? Who would you put in a higher level of that's the favorite to win. That's the favorite to go farther.
I promise this is not an SEC bias because I'm not a Bama fan. So I promise this is not an SEC bias. But I mean, I'm looking at the 2 teams and I'm going, I got to go Bama.
Yeah.
And we talked about it in the hallway earlier. It was a week 2 loss.
Yeah.
I mean, week 2 it might as well be last year.
I mean, yeah, and what people are quick to forget is that, Jalen Milroe wasn't the Jalen Milroe we see now back then.
That was his third start of his career.
That was his
Texas?
third start, against Texas, and the one against he played. It was Texas A&M the year prior before they played Tennessee,
and then he played MTSU the week before.
MTSU
the Texas
before,
game.
right? And then, but what's interesting is he got benched the next week for Tyler Buckner, the Notre Dame transfer.
He looked terrible.
He looked horrible. So Jalen Milroe is their best option, but the way that he was playing back then and the way he's playing right now, I mean, he's a Heisman caliber quarterback right now. He's not going to get the invite, but he's playing to that same level as a Jaden Daniels or a Michael Penix or a Bo Nix. So, I would have to err on the side of what you're saying. I think, personally, I think Alabama should be in, but like I said before, the committee is going to take the path of least resistance. They don't want to answer questions on this certain situation, and so I'd say if everything falls the way we're saying, Texas is probably going to get the nod.
But I think if it goes the way we're saying, they're going to have to answer questions regardless, because you're either going to leave Texas or Alabama out, and both have merits to get in.
I would also argue that since that Week 2 game, Alabama hasn't lost again. They've not lost a single game despite having to go against LSU, Tennessee. LSU, Tennessee,
a tough Texas A&M team, which is not ranked, but a tough Texas A&M team.
Just they've had to go up against all of these teams and still have not lost a game. While Texas, since then, the only time, funny enough, we were talking earlier about the best ranked team that they played, which was Oklahoma,
and they lost.
Yeah, it was their only loss on the year. The only loss on the year, only loss since then. Yeah. So it's really hard to see the overall point, especially for Texas. And if memory serves, wasn't that game against Alabama the one where they had 21 points or so in that fourth quarter? They were basically down for the entire. It was
really close, and
then
Texas just kind of poured it on in the second half. But we talked about this as well. That Oklahoma loss does not look as good as it did in previous. Because a lot of people thought there was going to be a rematch in the Big 12 championship,
and there should have been, because Oklahoma State was on the ropes with BYU this past week, but they ended up sneaking by in double overtime.
Mm-hmm. You want to talk about a confusing college football team? It's Oklahoma State.
That team. I don't even know. I think Texas. I think Texas is going to win that game. As everybody else,
but they might not.
Oklahoma State's got the best running back in the country, in my opinion. Ollie Gordon III. He was up for the Heisman. He was in the Heisman running for a long time, the middle portion of the season. So I don't know. You just don't know what you're going to get with that.
And
team.
Here's a scenario before we get out of college football that we haven't talked about, and I don't think is talked about enough. But there is a scenario that we pointed out earlier. Okay, let's say Georgia does take care of business, because they are Georgia, and we're talking a lot about Bama, but Georgia's Georgia. Georgia take care of its business. Not Washington.
Oregon.
No, hold on. Let me restart. Georgia, Michigan, Florida State take care of business. Okay, they're all undefeated. Oregon and Texas both win. Who are you throwing in there? Because as of right now, Oregon's ranked ahead. But if you're Texas in that scenario, they have a common opponent against Texas Tech. Oregon barely beat Texas Tech again early in the season. Texas mollywopped them on rivalry week. And then you take a look at the strength of record and strength of schedule. Texas has got them in that category. Because, Oregon, their only win that would be somewhat impressive would be Oregon State and Washington.
It's just egregious that Ohio State is ranked above Texas right now. I think the 7th slot, but just for the graphics' sake. But, I don't know, and that's where the committee, in my opinion, is, they're not going to be able to win for losing. And I think what they'll do, in my humble opinion, is I think they'll put Texas in that just based off of, and this is me speculating, just based off of Texas has a bigger pool money-wise than Oregon.
Bigger audience.
You're saying, okay, so you're going to tell me it's Texas, Georgia, Florida State, Michigan? That is unbelievable. Think about the money situation that the NCAA and all these big corporations are gonna flood to. If you think that doesn't play a factor in this whole thing, you're very naive.
I would actually think that they put Oregon in this situation, because when you it's kind of like what we were mentioning before about strength of schedule, right? Neither team really it seemingly has that hard of a schedule, or in Oregon and Texas. However, if Oregon does beat Washington, then you not only he fought hard against them the first time he played against them in Week 7, where they I think they won 36. Washington won 36-33.
Yep.
But now you got revenge against them, and I believe it is away in Washington again. So you come back, you beat them for a second time, and while Texas does end up having, kind of like what we said, Texas does beat Alabama, because like just going by what you said earlier, if Texas beats Alabama, if Oregon beats Washington, one thing that I think is also not seen in this is you would have beaten a undefeated team. Oregon would have beaten Washington, and that would be Washington's first loss the entire season, right at the end, with a guy who is, what's his name?
Michael Penix.
Michael Penix, Heisman candidate.
Yep, and if you go in, beat him after you played them tough the first time, I think that propels you forward more so than Texas, because while neither team's schedule is that great, neither team has played a lot of ranked opponents, you still have that aspect of, well, we did beat an undefeated team.
Yeah.
We also have only one loss on the year.
Yeah.
We don't.
To that team that we just beat.
Yep.
What's interesting, though, about that situation in the Pac-12 championship is Michael Penix he's hurt right now.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he's going to play,
Yep.
but he's hurt. There's a reason that Vegas has that line at 10 right now. I think it's -9.5 Oregon. So it's like, you know, are the two teams that far apart skill-wise on the field? No. I mean, obviously. I mean, Washington won the last time. This game's a neutral site in Las Vegas, so that could play into it. Who, you know, both teams will travel. You know, both fan bases will travel, but I don't think this Washington team that Oregon's about to play is anywhere as prepared and ready to play this game as what they were back in week 6, week 5, something like that.
No doubt. So, there's a scenario in which Georgia could not make the playoffs, and that's crazy to me. But that's why
lose to Bama.
That's why this season is great, and I think it's part of the reason why the 12-team playoff is going to lose a little bit of its sting, because you're not going to have these many scenarios. Now you're going to have a lot of scenarios at 12, 13, 14, and 15.
Yeah.
But it's not the same.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, you have 7 teams that have a legitimate chance to compete for the national championship.
Well, take Louisville, for example, though. I want to touch on this. Take Louisville, for example. If this was a 12-team playoff, if Louisville would beat Florida State, they're in. That's exactly. So they'd probably go into, like, the 9 slot, and they're at 15 right now. So, I mean, those type of teams, it keeps them in it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it keeps the Oklahoma States in the game longer, and I think that's going to pay off. Obviously, it's going to make a bunch of more money. You don't
maybe see as many big time guys who aren't in the playoffs declare for the draft and not play the bowl game.
Yeah,
so that could be
crazy.
That could be an interesting. I think that's a very good point.
I would also like to add on back on the Oregon and Texas deal. When looking at it, Texas has 6 close games the entire season, while Oregon's only had 4. And they've pretty much been Oregon's been dominant almost every team they faced. The teams they barely had a close game against: Texas Tech, Washington, Washington State was kind of close, and then USC. Everything else was just seemingly straight up blowouts.
Yeah, Texas was kind of flirting with danger for the longest time, but. Guys, we talked about college football for about 18 minutes, so we are going to move on to the NFL. I mean, I could talk about it for another 30 minutes, but unfortunately we have a time cap. So let's move on to the NFL. Week 11 saw a lot of action as Detroit held up their annual tradition on Thanksgiving as they lost on Thanksgiving to the Packers 29-22. The Dolphins claimed the first ever Black Friday game over the Jets 34-13, and the Tennessee Titans
finally
get a win. 17-10 over the Panthers, their 4th win of the season. But the reason I put this game on is because Frank Reich was fired.
Because you're a Titans fan.
That's a bonus. But Frank Reich was fired after a 1-10 season. And he's the first coach to be a head coach and be fired back-to-back seasons. You remember about this time last year he was fired as the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. And guys, let's talk about that for a second before we talk about the week 13. I guess it was week 12.
Yeah.
I messed up the weeks. I've had a rough episode.
It's fine.
I feel almost bad for Frank Reich.
I feel terrible.
Because he keeps getting put in these horrible situations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at there's a video circulating around of Bryce Young. He's in the pocket, and he gets pressured about every drop back.
Yep.
And he rolls out to his right, makes a great play to escape Jeffrey Simmons, I think it was. And he has, like, Jonathan Mingo coming on a crosser or across the field, and he slings it to him, puts it on the money, like, right to the hash, and Jonathan Mingo jumps up in the air and, like,
his full momentum was pushing him to the sideline.
And he turns his feet out of bounds. Like, there was no shot he would ever catch that football and get 2 feet in. And it's like Bryce Young does everything he's supposed to do and still can't win. And that's not on Frank Reich. That's my point. It's like Frank Reich he keeps getting put under the bus.
We talked about this, Trey, going to lunch. I mean, the team is terrible.
Yeah.
They don't have a good roster.
Yep.
They have good players at spots. Their
Yeah.
left tackle is really good. They have a great outside rusher who's, Brian Burns. He's going to be gone to free agency.
He's a dog.
He's a dog, but he's already packed his bags. He's ready to get out of there.
He's about to get paid.
Yep, he's about to get paid. They have some good players, and then they have the rookie quarterback, but their roster overall is terrible. And you fire a guy after 11 games, 12 weeks. I mean, what does that tell the next guy that you're hiring, that you don't even give a guy a full season before you can? I know it's the NFL, and I know you got to produce in order to win in this league, but give the guy 2 years at least.
Right.
Yeah. I'm mostly out of everything with this Panthers team, I'm mostly disappointed about this defense, man. Like, I'm gonna read off these names, all right? These are names of all of the players that are on the Panthers defense. You've got Deshaun Williams, Shai Tuttle, Derek Brown, Brian Burns, Deion Jones, Frankie Louvu, who's been fantastic this year, Dante Jackson, Von Bell, Xavier Woods, C.J. Henderson. With in the back you have Troy Hill, Jeremy Chin, who's on the IR, and J.C. Horn, who's on the IR.
Yeah. While
also on the IR for your defense with Yatir Gross-Matos and Shaq Thompson. Even with even with those 4 injuries, this should not be as bad of a defense as it is. If I saw correctly, they're one of the worst total defenses in the NFL. They've got the sad thing is, with those injuries to the secondary, they're one of the better teams at stopping the pass.
Which is crazy to me because Jeremy Chin and J.C. Horn are 2 of the best defensive backs in the league. If we're talking about, who would you want to start a franchise with on the defensive side of the ball? I mean, gosh, give me J.C. Horn, give me Jeremy Chin, and Yatir Gross-Matos. He's a phenomenal pass rusher. So
Shaq Thompson's no slack at linebacker either.
That's what I'm saying. So these are their best players, other than Brian Burns. Von Bell, he's getting old. C.J. Henderson's not the player we all thought he was going to be coming out of Florida. They're definitely missing their kind of rock of their team.
Yeah, but give the guy a chance.
Exactly. I agree.
And listen, if you're a head coach potentially interviewing for this job, a guy that, if a lot of people throwing out there is Eric Bieniemy, they're saying, hey, let him take the head job. And if I'm Eric Bieniemy, I'm going, no.
He's got such a great – he's going to be the head coach in Washington next year. He's got draft picks out the wazoo. He's got a front office that is practically going to let him do about whatever he wants. And so, why would you leave Washington at this point?
For a dumpster fire in Carolina.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't know. But we're going to take a look at the Week 13 really quick before we move on. Big night tonight. Cowboys and Seahawks, big NFC matchup for the wild card, potentially some big wild card implications there. And then the biggie this weekend, San Fran and Philly. The 49ers and the Eagles will take it out, as those 2 are trying to duke it out for the number 1 overall seed in the NFC. And then Sunday Night Football, which I believe – no, that was next week. They announced that there's going to be flex, including the Chiefs. But it's not this week. This week, it will be Mahomes versus Jordan Love, the rematch at Lambeau Field.
Wow.
We'll see how that goes. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. The Packers have been playing decent football the past couple of weeks. And I tell you what, as a guy who owns Mahomes in fantasy, he needs to get his butt in gear because I'm tired of these little neaky-dink 18-point performances.
Okay.
I mean, you're Patty Mahomes, dude.
Most fantasy owners would be loving an 18-point performance from a quarterback, you know.
Yeah, but he's Patty Mahomes.
I get that.
I'm trying to, like, get him 25+. If he doesn't get 20+, I'm a little bit disappointed.
To add insult to injury on that, it could be a snow game up there in Wisconsin.
And Josh Dobbs is on bye, which thank God I didn't play him this week. He came back down to earth, didn't he?
Yeah, but they should have won the game. Like,
oh yeah.
I mean, even after him tossing 4 interceptions, like, they should have won that football game, which is crazy.
5 total turnovers, 2 turnovers from the Bears, just such ugly football.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was such. I didn't even hardly watch it. Thank God. I was sitting by a fire and was like, I'll just sit here and just keep up with the fantasy score because I was pretty much already lost at that point.
Yeah.
Quickly with the NBA, some Cinderella stories so far in the NBA as the Minnesota Timberwolves are having a really good season. The Orlando Magic, as we're taking a look at the standings right now, Timberwolves are at number 1 in the West at 13-4, and then I believe the Magic are still number 1 or number 2 in the East.
They're number 2, right behind the Boston Celtics, who are 14-4, and they're 13-5.
Yeah, but I mean, you want to talk about a surprise? The Orlando Magic, out of all teams,
they've got some studs. Their draft capital that they've had over the past few years, they've finally come around to fruition. The Jalen Suggs, the Cole Anthony, the who they drafted Banchero, right?
I'm not sure.
Banchero,
Banchero.
They've also got Markelle Fultz, Franz Wagner, Cole Anthony.
That's a great roster, in my opinion.
Yeah, Markelle Fultz was a guy that was like just berated for how much of a bust he was, and it's like now it's like he's actually somewhat turned himself into a pretty solid basketball player. And then Golden State off to a really slow start. I think last time I saw they were 8-9. I don't know if they've had games since then, but they're kind of off.
They did, and they lost that one. I believe that was against the Rockets.
So where
are
they? About 8-10?
They lost it. Yeah, they 8-10. They just faced the Rockets 2 days ago, where they lost 123-124 after leading by like 20-plus points in the third quarter, and they blew it right at the end.
Are we finally seeing the end of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, like in terms of that dynasty, and Draymond Green? Are we finally at the end of that road?
Not Steph Curry. We are probably seeing the end of Klay Thompson and Draymond Green because one thing I did see at the very end, and I didn't notice this until someone pointed it out to me, but on the final shot in that game against the Kings, Klay Thompson wide open on the right side of the court. Steph has the ball. There's still like a couple of seconds left, so you could pass it to him. He gets a wide open, clear shot for a 3. They don't pass it to him. He just goes up for it. I think that speaks to like how little confidence at this point they have in Thompson because he hasn't had a good season, if I remember correctly.
He has not so far.
And I think they are just on a downward spiral, and it might get much worse before it gets any better.
No doubt. And before we get out of here, we didn't mention it at crunch time, but we do want to have our thoughts and prayers with Dylan Walden. As you guys notice, he is not with us today. He has had a family situation pop up. He will not be with us for the rest of the semester, but our thoughts and prayers are with him. He will be back next semester, as far as we've been told.
Yeah.
But our thoughts and prayers are with Dylan Walton. And so, Dylan, we hope everything is good with you. We hope you can get through this. Our thoughts and prayers are with you. But as we end this episode, shout out to Paige Hearn and Isabella Christian in the back running the show, Mr. Trey Whiteout running the graphics, my man Reese Britt over here, and Steve Sawyer, David Ellison, and Doc V for allowing us to use this wonderful studio. We should be back next week for our final episode next week. We'll kind of keep you updated on social media with that. But, guys, this has been a Role Players Podcast, and we'll see you. Peace.